Congressman Ed Markey, a year after the Gulf disaster, what have we learned?
Every week they've scaled back. There's a few crews. Here we are a year later. There's still no sense of urgency. And all we ever asked from day one was to do the right thing.
The Coast Guard and the oil companies are trying to prevent an environmental tragedy. Today, a sheen of oil up to 100 square miles floats over the Gulf. While officials say they don't see any crude spilling from the underwater wellhead, they are taking no chances. The weather is going to play a huge role in containing this spill. As you can see, the high winds and rough seas, they can push the oil towards the shoreline, and that can threaten the many wildlife that call the Gulf of Mexico home.
That, of course, was only the beginning. 3 days after the historic oil spill, NBC's environmental correspondent Ann Thompson was reporting on a disaster that only got worse and worse and worse. Ann spent months there and has since returned frequently. This as we mark the one-year anniversary of the worst oil spill in the nation's history this week. With gas prices now topping $5 a gallon in some cities, including ours right here, there is a push to expand deepwater drilling, including from politicians from both parties representing the Gulf states. Massachusetts Democrat Congressman Ed Markey is ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee and was a leading voice in the BP investigation. Congressman, thanks so much. Let's take a look back and talk about what have we learned. What changes have we made in the safety of deepwater drilling since a year ago?
There have been some changes, but the reality is that the Blue Ribbon Commission that was put together in order to study what happened and make recommendations for new safety features has been completely ignored by the Republican Congress. Senator Graham and EPA Administrator Bill Riley put together basically a blistering, scalding indictment of practices that existed before that accident. They basically then put together the to-do list in order to make sure that drilling is safe. And right now, the Republicans have blocked the implementation of any new legislation that would improve safety in the Gulf of Mexico.
So basically, we know what needs to be done, and it hasn't been done a year later.
That is correct. This Blue Ribbon Commission laid out the problems, and other studies have also confirmed that there are still fundamental flaws in blowout preventers out in the Gulf of Mexico. We're still using the spill response plans that are predating the Macondo well disaster. And we have a Republican Congress that just in the last couple of weeks has begun moving legislation that says to the Department of Interior, you have 60 days to approve or disapprove of a license to drill for oil. And if you don't do anything in 60 days, it is deemed to be approved and they can go out and begin drilling. So that's the mentality that exists. It's a pre-spill mentality. They are revising history rather than revising the safety rules that need to be put on the books in order to protect against a repetition.
But of course, it's hard to find an elected political leader in the Gulf who doesn't want more drilling. I mean, we know that Senator Landrieu, Mayor Landrieu, was holding up completely unrelated nominations, confirmations in the Senate because of the temporary ban on drilling.
No, and I appreciate that, but at the same time, 11 lives were lost. We have yet to change those rules, which will allow for greater compensation to go to victims. The fishermen down there in the Gulf of Mexico, they of course lost vast amounts of income, and only a fund that BP was forced to put together has helped to compensate them. So I understand why the oil men in the Gulf of Mexico want to go right back to business as usual. But the truth is that lessening safety standards should not replace learning the lessons of what happened to ensure that we are able to guarantee the safety going forward. And that is just something that I think makes common sense for the people who live down there, as well as everyone else who lives off the coastline of the United States, since the Republicans passed legislation just a week ago that will allow for drilling of oil off of the California coast, off of the Massachusetts coast, off of every pristine beach in the United States. So I don't think those people are happy about the Republican approach to safety with regard to drilling for oil off of the coastlines.
And let me play a little bit of Brian Williams' interview with a shrimper, Dean Blanchard, last night.
Until I'm dead, I believe every morning when I'm going to wake up, I'm going to think of BP. For the first day, I realized that BP wasn't trying to pick up the oil. You know, I mean, it was a pain in my heart. I always said, if you took the last 5 Nobel Prize winners and said your only job is to mess up Dean Blanchard's life and his business, they could have did a finer job than BP. It's destroyed our way of life.
That is the human toll.
That is the human toll. Honestly, BP was more concerned with their own liability than they were with the livelihoods of the fishermen and those in the tourist industry who were down in the Gulf of Mexico. And we can't forget those people because it basically changes a way of life. So you put the oilmen aside, and I know they're drill, baby, drill, and we want them ultimately to be able to drill for oil. We need the oil, and in the Gulf of Mexico, it is our richest supply. But at the same time, it has to be balanced with safety standards so that the lives of people who are endangered can be protected. Right now, we have 4 times the fatalities on rigs in the Gulf of Mexico as any other country in the world that drills for oil. Now, how can we have the worst safety standards as opposed to our competitors in the drilling of oil in the world? The United States should be #1 in safety and #1 in drilling, but #1 in drilling safely. And the oil industry in the United States is still fighting those safety standards, even though they comply with those standards when they drill off the shores of other countries.
Ed Markey, thank you very much.